Well, I can say this is an amazing audience, Victor.
Yes.
We've had a full day, a long day. So if there's any evidence of longevity, I think we've seen it today. Let's bring this great meeting today, some great discussions, with a couple of things to think about. One of those is we've talked about biology, we've talked about medicine, we've talked about social care, we've talked about physical infrastructure, policy, broad mandates, all centered around this healthy longevity question. And I'm sure there's people in the audience that often wonder, and you and I as leaders find sometimes this daunting question of how do you bring all this together and actually move forward with such a complex but huge mission?
Well, first of all, Mehmood, I'm exhilarated, not tired. We can do some more. You want to do another day? I'm sure the audience feels the same way. There's so much information and so many great ideas. But I think your conference clearly emphasized the importance of this issue, no question, right? The importance of healthy longevity, particularly in the lifespan approach and a health span approach, a life course and health span approach. That's key. So then by that nature, there's a lot of components to it. And I guess our speakers have emphasized it will take an all-of-society approach. But I think you're starting the right way, because as you begin to look at each area and increase the awareness of the importance of health longevity, each area can begin to move in those directions. In other words, putting a lens of health longevity in everything that we do. So I don't mean to fix everything at the same time, but just to be thinking of healthy longevity, everything we do, right? So for example, healthy cities, we talked about earlier. Now, if policymakers will only design cities with that in mind, that's one direction. Research, certainly you see a lot of people interested in doing research. If one were to look at this, so if every field that it touches is thinking about how to consider health longevity in their thinking, I think that's a starting point.
Well, along that, one of the discussions that we at Hevolution had early on, even in the genesis and the idea of Hevolution, was not only to make it a nonprofit, right? With the goal being that this was going to be investment in science, the philanthropy part, but also investment in the private sector to develop both sectors in this field. But the question that's illustrated in our vision and mission about for the benefit of all, right? That's very much part of our vision and mission statement, that we want to extend healthy lifespan for the benefit of all. And this was thought about because of the importance in our minds of inclusivity.
Yes.
And how to think about that this is an opportunity to benefit every human being. As you travel around the world, and as you think about the global roadmap, and if you recall when we were writing, there's a lot of questions came up about if there are these amazing scientific breakthroughs, if there are investments in infrastructure, who is this for?
Yeah.
And so how do we bridge this vision for the average man on the street saying, this is me as well, and how do I benefit?
That has to be a fundamental principle in this entire effort. Equity, meaning that everybody should have the access and the ability to potentially being healthier as they age. So health longevity should be an equitable issue. That obviously goes all the way from health system care, public health, to in fact housing, to the research piece as you mentioned, right? I think one of the panelists talked about how do you actually take all these great science and begin to make it available? Well, I think this is a fundamental question that we need to ask ourselves. Certainly when we first started this initiative, Mehmood, you'll remember, we were criticized for saying, well, this is all about rich people wanting to live longer, right? It's really not about everybody. I think certainly from the work that you've done and the report, the plan, the roadmap, have emphasized importance of equity. And so equity, of course, cuts across everything that we think about. And so it will be thinking about your own population and the fact that there are people who are more rich than those who are not, how do you actually have a policy, or how do you create an environment that everybody will have access to those opportunities, whether it's housing, whether it's drug, whether it's food, you name it. It's a global issue too. We all know about low-income countries where in fact they have much less ability to access those opportunities. So I think the issue, as you said, is equity, inclusivity for all. It's really important.
So one of the things that we've been planning, and as much as of a look forward, is when we conceived the idea of holding this meeting, of bringing scientists, biotechnologists, policymakers, decision makers together, and to understand the roadmap and start to understand what the roadmap means, but particularly for the GCC and the kingdom. What does it mean for this community, these countries, in this part of the world, given cultural differences, given biological potentially differences, given variability in genetics, etc. As we start to understand all of this, we start to look to the future. And we said, this is the first step in that journey. As I look to the future, and one of the things we're planning now is later this year, around November, we'll be announcing the date. We want to have a global summit, which will bring together, in that this notion of inclusivity, scientists, biologists, physicians, educators, but also biotechnologists, venture capitalists, investors, policymakers, but also ethicists.
Yeah.
One of the things that we didn't get a chance to touch on today was the bioethics of this. This is an important question that comes up. We're planning to convene all of this so that we can have a much larger convening of these different facets. So, two questions. As you think about the roadmap, ethics is also a global thing. So it's one thing to say it's inclusive. There's you and I have talked about this in the past. Science has a basis for knowing what we can do. There's a different question of what we should do. How do we start to think about this from an ethical point of view?
Well, first of all, I think you're doing absolutely the right way. I think this audience are major decision makers, knowledgeable audience. As we said, you're going to have to start thinking, how do you one step at a time, right? And so I think from this meeting, I hope many people walk away to say, wow, I've learned something. I see the importance of this. And in my world, I'm going to try to do something about this. I think that's critically important. I also think that, as we discussed earlier, that when you begin to think about this topic, I think Linda and others point out, it's not really about aging. It's about the whole health span, life course, right? I mean, we emphasize the fact that, if you look at NCDs, it starts early and certainly is very high in this region. And then if you're not healthy, then of course you're going to end up being unhealthy when you're older. So I think really in many ways we're trying to transform the entire society in many different ways. Your minister talked about transformation of health. Well, I think you're spot on because this is about transformation of health. But it's also transformation of society. Think about the opportunities offered and the economy that can be developed. So when you think about your next meeting, I think it's perfect because you want to have much broader audience for them to be aware of this issue, and that you want the world to know that Hevolution and the region and Saudi is taking leadership on this. So inviting a lot more people to get that momentum going. Third thing, in my opinion, is that it requires a movement, right? So we can talk a little bit about research that you're doing. Early on it was said by, I think it was Sergey who says, there's $2 billion spent in health and aging and $100 billion spent on cancer, right? So if I go around a university and say to a young person, what research are you doing? I don't think they'll come say aging is the first one they say. They say cancer, cardiovascular, brain, or whatever. So I think starting a movement of people more aware of this, either as students or as medical students or as researchers, is a very important issue to develop that kind of culture. So I think the way that you are positioning is perfect. In a way, that's what we try to do with National Academy. Recognize that we don't have all the bandwidth, but partnering with you, partnering with John Wong in Singapore, being in DC with AARP was really important to partner with others who in fact have also reached a larger audience and then being able to move this thing forward.
So let me build on the partnership question. I know there's a very exciting initiative which, modesty won't allow you to say it's your brainchild, but
No.
I can say it. This whole competition that you've conceived, you've launched, you've been doing this now for at least 3 cycles.
Yeah.
So 2 parts to that question. One is, share with us this notion of a competition that is under the umbrella of the Academy from a sponsorship point of view. And secondly, what can we do in the region to partner to further amplify and maybe hopefully accelerate it even more?
Absolutely, yeah. So what Mehmood's saying is the vision that there should be a lot of young people or even senior people interested in putting their mind.
I'm sorry, Victor, I thought we were young.
I describe old as anybody who's 1 or 2 years older than I am. But anybody who's doing research to think along the way of saying, boy, this is really important, I want to do something. And when we start thinking about this, it was quite difficult because you can imagine one idea would be to put grants out there and ask people to apply. That's more traditional method. One of our members, unfortunately passed away, Tachi Yamada, was running the Gates Foundation, and he started this Grand Challenge Exploration. And he, together with Bob Horvitz, Nobel laureate, helped me design this whole idea of getting more global activities and research. So the Gates Foundation did this idea to say, if you look at the way that NIH funds research, is usually, okay, you need to put in multiple pages, you got to show that you've done some of the experiments so it's feasible, you have preliminary data, and that really stifles innovation. So Tachi's idea was to say, let's just ask for bold ideas. Some won't work, some will work, but if you're bold, then you can have breakthrough. So the idea of providing a small amount of money, a seed money, $50,000 in this case, and just to throw it out and say, give us 1 or 2 pages only. No preliminary data needed, and we're going to assess how important your idea is, and then give you some money to get started. That was the idea of the global competition. And we did have a design group that includes Mark Wolpert, at the time he was UKRI head, and others. So as a result of that, we decided to do it, of course, internationally, globally. So I went and connected with a lot of my friends, like you and others, to say, would Singapore, China, Japan, United Kingdom, EU, Canada, and others like to join us in this? And what's really amazing, and I hope that you will consider this here, is the fact that the competition is regional. You put out the competition regional, but under a coordinated umbrella of national academies, under the same criteria, same standard. But then what you do is you say, Gulf region, send us your proposal, and we'll select ones to increase the number of innovators in that space, right? And so here's what we did. We had 12 sponsoring organizations. They are, for example, the Japan NIH called AMED. They are the Chinese Academy of Medical Sciences, the Singapore Ministry of Health, and so on and so forth. And we put out the announcement, and guess what? 1,500 applications globally. And the range of ideas is just great.
Amazing.
And yeah, and we fund 150. And now, as you said, we did 3 cycles. Same level of interest, if not going up, and we fund about 10% of this. And we just got all our funders to agree to go for another 3 years. Now, because of EU and other countries, the regions, we cover more than 12 countries. There's actually 50 countries and territory. So a lot of interesting application. As you know, I've been talking to you about what about here, right? There's so much excitement. I guess the main thing I'm saying is that the idea of getting people interested. Okay, I got an idea. I don't have to go and do all that stuff, but if I were to just put forward an idea and then they give me some money to prove it, I will go for it. And we take no intellectual property. it belongs to the university or the investigator. And then what happens is we have a second level, which I talked to you about also, called Accelerator Award, which the good ones will get more funding, like $500,000 or more, to help them move towards commercialization. So that's the concept.
Well, look, we're excited. I can, in closing, just give a little data point. We just at Hevolution announced grant requests for the kingdom for any scientist, researcher, medical or basic, working in the kingdom. In the first announcement, we've received over 120 applications.
Fantastic, yeah.
Within a few weeks. So there's a lot of excitement. There's good science being proposed. We're looking through it. In fact, it's been one of those great positive surprises. A little overwhelming. We have to review all these grants, but it's great. I look forward to this discussion around how do we move forward with this grand challenge for the region. We're honored and delighted for Riyadh and the kingdom to not only host this, but actually help lead it, not only for the kingdom, but for the GCC and the region. And ultimately, through our whole network of partnerships, moving this field. So I thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
I, in closing, want to thank the people who helped organize this meeting, including our partners at RAA, the entire Hevolution team, our team at the National Guard under Dr. Bandal Kanawi's leadership, the GCC, the GHC, Global Health, the Gulf Health Council partners, all have taken this mission on. And what's been amazing for me is that everybody in that partnership took ownership. They were not doing this for Hevolution. They were not doing this for anyone. It was everybody in together for this. And if this is a sign of things to come, I think this is a fantastic movement forward. Thank you.
Well, let me thank you for your leadership. Really, I think both in terms of seeing the opportunity and the potential of this area, because you were in life biosciences, right? To moving on to create a foundation that is nonprofit to support this idea. And to this, your whole team, and to His Excellency, Dr. Banda, to help us put this thing together. Just wonderful. We're so glad to be here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
As a